tired of hearing the same old advice when it comes to real estate? Do you want to learn from the biggest and baddest mistakes in the industry? Then welcome to Learn From My Mistake, the podcast that brings you real estate professionals from all over, sharing the biggest blunders and how to avoid them. I'm one of your hosts, Jake Remillard, and I'm joined by my partner, Marie Baginski. We're here to give you the inside scoop on what not to do in the real estate game. From brokers to investors, we've got it all. We're not just here to tell you about our guest failures, though. We're here to help you learn from them so you can make the right moves when it counts. So buckle up and get ready to hear some juicy stories and expert advice you won't find anywhere else. This is Learn From My Mistake. New episodes drop every week. Don't miss out. Learn from my
What's going on, everybody?
Hello.
That intro is awesome. I love it.
Perfect, right? Yeah. Get you going. All right. So Learn From My Mistake. This is episode 15. So I don't know. I feel like 15 is a lucky number, Mariano.
Yeah, it ain't 13.
It ain't there.
And you know, like statistically, most podcasts only make it to episode 10. So we're doing better than the average.
There you go.
Well, congrats, you two.
Yeah. So Marie Baginski, Jake Remillard, we're your hosts. We've been hosting this for a while. So if you've been listening, hopefully we don't need any introduction. But if you're looking to buy or sell a property in Fayetteville, North Carolina, reach out to us. And with that, our guest this week, Mariano Simrod. So we met at the Boardroom Mastermind. And, you know, we love hearing all the advice that you give to so many of the members of that mastermind. And we know you've been in the business for a while. So we thought we'd have you on, share some of your experience with our guests. So start us out. How did you get started in real estate?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for thinking of me. I sincerely appreciate it. You know, meeting you guys at Boardroom and then talking to you about your business and seeing what you do was pretty cool. And then hearing about the podcast and you reaching out, I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So again, thank you. So how did I get started in real estate? It was kind of I kind of fell into it, I would say. My background is heavy in training, developing, mentoring salespeople and sales teams across the country. And I'll try to keep it really short, but I was in Columbus, Ohio, of all places, working at a company called ADT, which most people know about, the security company. Long story short, I don't want to be in Columbus anymore. I've been in Arizona a lot of years. And so I basically said, I'm going to move back to Arizona. And when I moved back, a very close personal friend of mine was also a real estate agent, was also wholesaling, and I had no idea what wholesaling was. But I was like, hey, I'm going to come back to Arizona. He's like, hey, you can stay with me. I'm an agent, so I'll find you a house to buy. You can stay with me until we buy a house, or you buy a house. Yeah. I said, cool. And so I was still running everything on the Midwest to East Coast. And so he would hear me every morning at 5 a.m. running through the sales numbers, talking to all the managers, and basically running my team. And so he would get up and listen to me at 5 a.m. And then one day, it was probably like midnight. He was doodling on his whiteboard and running all these numbers and stats because he was wholesaling. He was trying to figure out how to take it nationally. And it was kind of interesting. I looked at it and I saw what he was doing. And I asked him, and I said, if you change this particular KPI by 1%, you double your income. And he went, what? And I go, yeah, all you got to do is change this by 1%. And we started running the math, and his eyes lit up and he goes, well, I want to take this thing national. I don't want to just do it in Arizona. And I was like, well, who the fuck you think you're talking to, bud? That's what I do. Right. So, long story short, me, him, and then another friend of ours, they're basically like family. I've known these guys 25 years, but me, him, one other guy, and then the money guy all got together, the four of us, and we started a wholesale company. So one guy knew real estate wholesaling. One guy had all the money. I knew the sales aspect, and the other guy knew operations. And that's what happened. And this was late 2014. And so wholesaling was still a thing, but it wasn't quite, you know, as rampant as it is now. And so all we knew was direct mail. That was the only way to get leads. And so that's what we did. And Luckily, we blew it out of the box. I mean, we knocked it out of the park pretty quick. Within the first year, we were cranking. We were doing like 250 grand a month between the four of us. And so we thought our shit didn't stink at all, right? And then we
And
started
was
to
that
expand.
national at that point already, Mariano? Or were you kind of focused still in Arizona?
That was just Arizona, right?
Wow.
I had nothing to compare it to, so I didn't know if we were really that good or that's just what was supposed to happen,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But long story short, I don't want to say there was no such thing as virtual wholesaling, but people weren't doing it virtually. It was set an appointment, go to the house, close at the kitchen table.
Belly
And
to
so,
belly, yeah.
yeah, so our idea was to take this nationally. We got to go one market at a time. And so our second market was Dallas. We went out there, set up an office, had a presence there. We're doing it the same way we were doing it in Arizona. And we changed gears a little bit, got a hold of a shiny object, and kept 45 of our own properties as rentals, and had a huge staff at that point. Kept 45 properties. Did not pay ourselves, the wholesale company, for those properties.
Oof. Yeah.
So you can imagine all that marketing is going out. You're keeping all the properties. The wholesale company not making anything. Add that with a huge staff, and then you add that with a really, really bad quarter, and that's a disaster for a recipe for disaster. And so the other three guys said, "Fuck this! I don't like paying to go to work. I'm out." So
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, I like wholesaling." So at that point, I went at it by myself, created my own company, and got to do everything my way. And the rest is kind of history, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. I love the story. I love how, like, especially in the beginning, you talked about like it it kind of starting with that one conversation. There's something
Mhm.
special, I think, about those entrepreneurial moments that happen at like that midnight, those like late night conversations. There's
Yeah.
just something about those that I love them.
Yeah, I don't. There may have been some alcohol involved. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I just knew the
Yeah. There
numbers when I
usually
saw that.
is.
Yeah, right. Well, when I saw it, I went, "Hold on a minute," and then it
And for
clicked.
some reason, genius happens with just that little bit of alcohol and that like midnight time frame. Just
Yeah,
pure genius happens.
yeah. I mean that was literally the spark of the whole thing, and then it kind of just it exploded from there really quick. I quit ADT.
Yeah.
I just said I'm out, and they were like, "What?" And I was like, "I'm out," and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I love this story so much too because I think like straight off the bat, one of the most interesting things, like not maybe a lesson learned for you, but a lot of people that I know struggle when they first start with partners is like picking a lane, right? They're always like stepping on each other's toes. They're trying to do the same thing, especially like husband and wife combos or people trying to do it right with their significant other. But I love how you're like, well, one guy knew real estate, one guy knew sales, one guy had the money. Like you all kind of had your lane straight off the bat. I don't know if it
Yeah.
stayed that way,
Nope.
but yeah.
It didn't. So ideally, that's how it was going to be set up. We kind of had our silos, right? But if you think about this, only one guy knew real estate. I knew nothing about real estate. I really still don't, right? I just know sales, right? But one guy knew real estate. I knew sales, so I had no idea how to comp properties. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. So it was one of those things where it was organize and develop a sales team, but you have to be good at it in order to train anyone else to do it. So
Yeah.
I kind of had to learn on the fly, and I'm grateful that they didn't, but they didn't teach me anything about real estate. I had to learn it all from just trial and error, right?
Wow.
Because they were like, sales, just do it. I was like, all right. So botched a million calls, botched a million contracts, botched a million closings. And I'm glad I did it because now I know it very, very well. But yeah, that was one of the things. And so if you want to look at mistakes, I don't think making that partnership was a mistake. I mean, if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Right.
But going into that partnership, we sort of had clear roles and responsibilities. But over time, it was like, well, you don't know real estate. You need to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, it doesn't have anything to do with real estate. It's a sales tactic, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so it started to get kind of muddy. And so when I said that perfect storm happened at the same time, we were all having issues with each other anyway. Right.
Gotcha.
And so it was like, yeah, time for everybody to go. But I fell in love with it. And I'm like, I'm not letting this go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Can I want to ask you like a question based around the situation that we're in, and I think this would tie in really well to probably some of our viewers too. So I don't feel selfish asking. Um, I feel like I'm almost in the opposite spot with our sales team right now, where I had the real estate knowledge before I had the sales team knowledge.
Mhm.
So, And now I just found that like I honestly really just enjoy leading the sales team and like
There you
building
go.
out the systems and the processes and everything. What either just one or maybe more if you have them, what books would you recommend for somebody that is either doing a trial by fire, they've already burned the ships, they're in the sales leadership position,
Yeah.
or they want to get there? What would you recommend to them?
The one that's the top of my brain right now is the 5 Levels of Leadership, John Maxwell.
Okay.
I read that a long time ago, and it was so true. It was like, holy shit, this is really what it's about. Not only that, it helps you look at yourself and go, I'm not as good of a leader as I thought. There's a difference between management and leadership, right? Um, and I've been told throughout my career that you didn't manage us, you led us, right?
Mhm.
And that's why we followed you. And I didn't know that I was doing that. I don't know where I learned it, but when I read that book, I was like, aha, right? And at the same time, it lets you know that you think you're a great leader, but of the 5 levels, you're only at a level 2 right now. You got a long way to go.
Yeah.
So if it's about leading anyone or anything, and with sales managers are leaders. They have to be leaders. I mean, you mentioned the processes and you mentioned setting things up and getting it going. You have to have that as a structure, right? But sales teams are so emotional. Like I look at them all like my kids, right? And it's like I have to change my personality and my style to each and every one of them to get them and so
Yeah.
the hard part with that is you really have to learn how to lead each person individually in order to get the most out of them and have them feel the most fulfilled and all these other things. And so, yeah, you got to have the structure, but you got to have the leadership. And that's just a lot of emotion. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of patience. And that's why I mentioned the word kids, because I don't have any kids, but you have to have patience with these people. You can't just say, the train's going this way really fast, get on and get out of the way.
Yeah.
Right. And I learned the hard way that works, right, for some people, but you're going to have a lot of turnover and you're going to constantly be tired from hiring, training, developing people, and then rehiring. Right. So keeping turnover low is one of the things that I pride myself on with the call center that I had for my business and my acquisitions guys and everything like that. It's how long do they stay with you is really a good representation of how good you are as a leader. So if you got a lot of turnover, either the business isn't making any money, or B, you're a shitty leader. Period.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So 5 Levels of Leadership, John Maxwell.
Yeah.
And how often do you have turnover now? Like, what is a sign for you if they stay a while? I think
That's a
should be
really good
subjective.
question. Really, really good question. So, my main acquisitions guy, or my longest tenured acquisitions guy, was going on 3 years now. He's a rock star. I mean, I kind of had the cheat code with him because before real estate, I was working at ADT. I was basically what I guess you call it a regional director, right? A bunch of
Yeah.
offices, a bunch of managers, and they were all like 20 or 30 years older than me. Imagine that, right? Funny.
Okay.
But before that, I was in the fitness industry. And I hired a guy right out of college who was a college basketball star, just never had a job, got hurt, didn't make it to the NBA, and hired him as a personal trainer. I taught him how to do training and I taught him how to do membership sales. And so as I worked my way up through that chain of gyms, every time I got promoted, I promoted him. So long story short, he's worked for me off and on in different capacities for over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Um,
That's
we're basically,
loyalty and
yeah,
like good connection between the two of you, obviously.
yeah. I mean, he's the kind of guy I can just let him know how it is. I don't have to sugarcoat anything, and he's got a
Yeah.
thick skin. He was an athlete, so they normally athletes have that, right?
Yeah.
But so he's been with me forever. And the number 2 position, that guy's fairly new, and you guys may remember this from boardroom, but he's going in his 7th. Actually, he's in his 7th month right now, and he's rocking and rolling. And with him, I took a big risk on this guy because he was very, very young, very inexperienced. But that's what I like. I don't want all the old habits from old sales
Well,
training.
this is how we do it in my old company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I know what I'm doing. I got it. I got it. I didn't want any of that. But this guy was so green that he's just had very little life experience in general, right?
Mhm.
And it was like, okay, Mariano, this is a test to see if you still got this shit. If you could teach this kid who's never really had a job how to do sales when he's not a sales guy by nature, maybe you're still good. So what ended up happening with him is I became obviously his boss, but I became more of a life coach and a mentor for him in life. Like
Nice.
I still train with him. We're 7 months in, and I still train with him 5 days a week for an hour, right?
Wow.
But what it's evolved into now is 30 minutes of what's going on with this deal, what objection you having trouble closing. It evolves from that to what's going on with his girlfriend, what's going on with his parents, what's going on with how he's doing in his mornings and his meditations and all the other stuff. And so whether he's with me for the rest of his life or another 2 months, we will still be connected as a mentor relationship, because I mean, he tells all the time, you're really affecting their aspects of my life. And that's why I do this shit. Right.
Yeah.
That gets me going. It touches me here when you're really, really affecting people's lives. And I think that's what I've learned over time. A mistake that I used to make when I was in the fitness industry. Well, in the fitness industry, it's a cutthroat industry, right? Hard closing was I mean, we looked up to the hard closers. If we called them body slamming somebody. If they took someone and they body slammed them and forced them into a membership, you're like, oh yeah, you're the shit, you're the guy, right?
Yeah.
And so when I referenced the train's going this way, get on or get out of the way, that's the way that I learned sales in my first taste of management. But what I've learned over time is that if you truly care about your people and you truly want them to succeed, even if it's not with you, that's how you get the most out of them, right? That's how you get loyalty, and that's how you get people that'll ride with you through anything. And so I'm glad that I learned it over time. It took me a while to get that, because I was such a numbers guy, and it's here's the numbers we have to hit. We just hit them. And now it's like, well, I just want this guy to be doing well, right?
Yeah.
And the numbers come. So that's a big change that I think's elevated my game in my business as a whole, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
that kind of reminds me, Jake, when we decided that we were going to have everyone on the team read the Energy Buzz, right? And we decided the whole team was going to read this book together, and then we were going to have a couple of meetings to talk about it. And it was so interesting to me that some of our VAs who, seem very robotic every time they're on the phone with us normally, really opened up to us about how this book impacted their life and changed how they were communicating with their family and their kids and all the other things. Right. And I just remember that, like you said, that touches you as a leader in a business. Wow, I'm actually affecting their lives. This has nothing to do with just meeting a number or hitting a KPI, right? This was your goal, but this is they're in tears. Thank you for having me read this book, because it actually has changed how I live my life.
Yeah, that's fucking leadership, right? Yeah. And not to mention, the better their home life is and all that stuff, the better they're going to do at work anyway.
Absolutely.
So even if it's from a selfish standpoint, because you want your numbers to be better, it still benefits them in so many ways, So it's you can't really lose when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far we've covered some awesome topics. From the sales, kind of the entrepreneurial, midnight drinking, brainstorming ideas and everything. But I think, going with the theme of the show, let's get into something juicy here. What was one of maybe the more significant mistakes that you have learned from so far?
Man, I would say, and this has kind of plagued me for a long time, listening to other people that have not done what you're doing or you want to do. And I hope neither one of my parents sees this podcast. I love my parents dearly, and they're the best parents in the world, and they care so much, right? But they care so much, and they think that their way is the right way because they're retired, they're good, right?
Yeah.
And they pushed me. I hate to say that, but now looking back, I realize that they pushed me into finance in college because they were like, "You love money. You're going to be great in finance. Go work, do Wall Street, right?" So I ended up going to college because I wanted to, which is I'm thankful that they enabled me to do that. But I didn't know what I wanted to do or be yet. Really, I just knew that I loved working out and I loved helping people because it fulfilled me inside. However, at that point, you don't know, can you really make a living at that, and what are you going to do? So they pushed me into finance, and so I got a finance degree and I did the Wall Street thing, and that only lasted about 2 years out of college doing finance stuff, and I quit and I went and I said I'm going to go be a personal trainer, and my parents were like, "Yeah, real funny, little motherfucker, yeah." We just paid for 4 years of college. You're going to go be a personal trainer. How much money are you going to make? And I said, I'm 100% commission. How many clients do you have? None. Right. But that was the start of me taking my own path right? And getting into something that I liked and I enjoyed. And I loved working out and I loved people. And that being in the fitness industry is where I learned sales. And they were hardcore sales trainers, so when it comes to, what path you end up taking, I'm nothing like my parents and my brother. Like I don't say the black sheep, but if you even saw a picture of my family, you're like, Mariano, you don't match, right? You can just tell I'm different. And so my brother's a lawyer. My dad's was an emergency room doctor, and my mom worked in the hospital. Now she's a housewife for my little, or stay-at-home mom for my little brother, right? They do all the stuff that on paper you're supposed to do: go to college, get a degree, do this. And I did all that and I could do it, but that wasn't my path, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't start in real estate till I was like 36, 37 years old, you know? But I'm like, if I started being an entrepreneur way back when I was 19 or 20, like I would be in a whole different place right now. Now I wouldn't take it back because I love where I'm at, but
Right.
it was never my path. And so listening to people that I thought were smarter than me and thought knew better than I did really just shot me in the ass because, if I would have learned the bumps and the bruises, like say Kent, being an entrepreneur from when the time you're a teenager, it'd be a whole nother ball game.
Right.
Right. So especially us entrepreneur types, the only people I will listen to is people that I admire because they've been where I'm going and they know through experience. They don't just know what America's dream or America's, what it's supposed to look like for an
Right.
18-year-old that's getting ready to go to college or whatever, right? So I think that's the biggest one, and I'm grateful that I finally stumbled my way through 3 careers before finding this one, just being an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. And it had to happen the way it happened, or I wouldn't be here because I wouldn't know sales.
Right.
But I, I just thought about this. Um, I knew I was an entrepreneur at 8 years old, and didn't know. And I got in trouble because I was selling rocks to kids in the neighborhood, and I thought it was quartz. I thought it was. So I was selling rocks to the kids in the neighborhood for 50 cents and telling them it was quartz. And my mom found out and she made me go give them all their money back, um, because it wasn't quartz. So I'm an entrepreneur by heart, right? And I didn't know it then, but I look back and laugh at it because I was always a hustler. I was always looking at ways to just make business and make things like that happen. So following the path that someone else had kind of laid out for you in their mind versus just doing
Right.
what fulfills you and makes you happy, that's a big one. Big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on two things there too, because one, it's usually is family
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
or close friends that, are kind of holding you back initially. Not that
Hmm.
because it's just out of their own fear or ignorance, right? Not knowing that there's another way. And of course it's always out of love.
Yeah.
But that is definitely a struggle for new entrepreneurs is like, how do I deal with all of my family and friends that don't want me to do this? Um, but then I think like being in the business for a while, like, are you very cautious from who you take advice from within the industry itself?
Hmm. 100%. Right. That was a really, really tough time with me and my parents because at some point I had to just, sack up and say, I'm not you guys.
Right.
I can't follow the path that you guys follow. I've done it 2 or 3 times in my career and worked my way up through all these companies and still was unfulfilled and still said, fuck it, and started all over again doing something else. Right. And they did it, like you said, out of love, but they also did it out of fear because they don't have entrepreneurial spirits. They don't have that entrepreneurial gene. And so it's unfathomable to some people how that could even be possible. And you're going to starve and all this, and this, but I'm not you.
Yeah.
Right. So I got to take my own path. And I'm just so grateful that I finally found it mid 30s. Right. It is what it is.
I've heard it kind of described in a way I like. It was Alex Hormozy. I've not mentioned him a couple times on the podcast, but like he talks about how like people, especially in this situation where they're advising you not to do something or like you said, don't, you're going to go broke or whatever. They know you as like the version of you that only exists to them,
Yep.
right? They don't know being an entrepreneur is so much more than just like, hey, I want to have my own job, I want to have my own business. It's the mindset that's there. It's the the thought processes that you have. It's so much more than that. And I think people are truly just scared of losing that version of you that exists to them, because you
Yeah.
go through such a dramatic change when it's something that you really dive into.
Yeah, 100%, right? It's like that fear that they have for you because it's so hard to succeed as an entrepreneur. But again, at the same time, it's I'm not you. Like as an entrepreneur, the thread that we all have in common is that we can't lose. It's not that we're just so talented that we won't. We just won't let ourselves, right? And I've made plenty of mistakes and ended up with a negative bank account and couldn't pay rent and all this stuff back in the day, right? And it's like I didn't die, right? I somehow dug my way out of it, and that's what entrepreneurs doing for other people. That's just unfathomable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's care for you, and it's fear of losing that version of you that they have in their mind, right? And they may not know the other side of you, whatever that is, and you may not even know it, so you may not have ever shown it to them, right? But um, I at the end of the day, you got to pursue whatever fulfills you somehow. Money's great, nice things are great, all that's awesome. That will come. But when you're doing what fulfills you, man, you can go so much faster and so much further and so much harder if you actually want to get up for the game and like what you're doing. And most people, again, that other generation, you're not. That was my dad's famous quote. I'll never forget it. Um, it's called work for a reason.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
He's one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to books and stuff. But he's an ER doc for years, and he hated every day of it. Right. He got into medicine because he wanted to help people, but learned very, very quickly that it's not like that with all the healthcare coverage and all the shit that he has to deal with. He hated every day of it. And so I can remember him telling me that, it's called work for a reason. And I was like, well, shit, I guess so. And so hence I started following that path. And my brother's in that path. My brother hates being a lawyer, but now he's in and he's got to pay his bills. So what's he going to do?
Oh,
Right.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just going after that entrepreneurial spirit, right? That's like even the podcast, learn from my mistake. Like we're not afraid to make those mistakes and learn from them and have those experiences. And there's so many people that are just afraid to make a mistake. And they think if they make that mistake, they're going to die. Like you said, like that's it. Everything, the whole, like the earth is going to implode all of a sudden that day. And it's like, no. This is part of our journey. And it's a personal journey, Jake, I think you touched on it too. There's so much that of you that changes as you become an entrepreneur, and you have to be willing to change personally, to become a better leader and better business owner. So
it teaches you to dig deep. I've found some shit within myself that I didn't know was there, and you got to hit those lows. You got to get to the bottom in order to tap into whatever it is that you tap into to get there, right? And that's just part of it. And over time, and you guys will know this, but over time, you look forward to challenges. You look forward to the tough stuff, and you look forward to see what you really got in your tank to see if you're as good as you think you are, right? You start to look forward to that stuff because in hindsight, you realize how much stronger it made you, how much better it made you. And you get to the point where you almost start to feel bulletproof, not because you think your shit doesn't stink, but because you're just not afraid of shit, right? And if you can get to that point mentally, there's really no stopping you in any industry that you're in when you're, if you're an entrepreneur, period.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
That's
All right,
gonna be like the headline when we post this.
One last question. I want to know if Mariano looked as much of a badass like he does today when he told his parents that he was going to go become a personal trainer. Because
fresh off Wall Street,
that doesn't know you or doesn't can't see you if they're listening to this. Obviously, you're not a tall guy.
No, not at all.
But you look like a badass.
Well, thank you.
Like in person, like you are stocky. You got your haircut with that. I mean, like you look like a badass. Well, so I want to know, like, when you were like, yeah, mom, dad, I'm going to leave Wall Street. I'm going to go become a personal trainer. Were you already like stocky and looking like a badass, or were you still skinny?
I think so. Well, let me puff myself up. No. So I had been working out really, really hard since I was about 15. I was out of college, so I was 22, and then 2 years out of that. So I was about 23, 24 when I went to the gym. So I'm blessed with good genetics. I'm not afraid to admit it, right? for those that can see me right now, I don't know how would I look anymore because I'm starting to show my age, but everyone thinks I'm about 15 to 20 years younger than I am, right?
Yeah.
And so when I had that conversation with my parents, the reason they hired me at the gym is because I was there all the time and people were walking around training with me. So some people say I still look like I did when I was 20, yeah, so 23 years ago, they say I still look the same. Maybe my hair was a little bit different, but I've always been a little bit off, I walked around with 2 earrings. I had my music blasting. I was that guy, back in my 20s. So I'd say similar. I've toned it down a little bit.
All right. So you were still a badass.
At least I thought I was way more of a badass back then. Sure, for sure.
You've gotten humbled now over the years.
I think so. Yeah, I definitely don't walk around like I did then, but I'm happy now, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Jake, you got any last questions before we wrap this up?
I hit them in early. The book was my main one that I really had thought of, just because our conversations have always been great. I've always taken a lot away from them. So that was my big one. And just honestly, thanks for sharing. I loved your mistake or that advice to not follow advice from the wrong people.
Yeah.
Great share. I think that's one that we haven't had on here before, and it's so true. It's so powerful, and anybody listening should absolutely take that and just run with it.
Yeah, 100%. If your gut's talking to you, whether you call it your gut, your subconscious, your soul, whatever, it's talking to you, just do it. Do whatever it is, Don't let your brain take over, and don't let all the other stuff that's going on in the world and what everyone says take over, right? It won't get you anywhere. You just got to go with whatever you're feeling and just run with it, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Mariano, let everyone know what's the best way to get in touch with you or do business with you.
That's a good one. My company, we fly under the radar pretty well. And we like it that way. But so for people who want to get a hold of me, by the way, I love to help people. That's why I'm in boardroom. That's why I coach. That's why I mentor. That's why I do the stuff I do. So there's plenty of people that reach out to me on a non-financial basis, right, for help. But email is easy. It's mario@simrodsystems.com. So my first name and then my last name, systems. So mario@simrodsystems.com. Or you can see the other side of me, which has some of the, as what we would call the badass stuff. On Instagram, I think it's _M40. So there's some workout stuff in there, and that's how I get most of my clients, believe it or not, is they reach out to me on Instagram, seeing the other stuff that I do. Yeah.
Is that a nod towards the gun, or
What's that?
Is that a nod towards the gun, the M40?
No, it's because I didn't start an Instagram until I turned 40 years old.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
You could have said yeah.
A late adopter, yeah. So yes, that is about the gun. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, yeah. Badass.
Yeah, you'll see gym stuff, you'll see gun stuff on there because you guys know I love shooting. But yeah, those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again. It was a pleasure. And we look forward to our next podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks again for having me. This is a great time. I mean, this is one of those ones where you just get to come on and have fun. So I definitely enjoyed it. You guys fucking rock and roll.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you as always.